In 1988, Christopher White drove his car off Chapman's Peak and fell nearly 100 meters onto the rocks below. Now, it should have been fatal. Instead, he walked away and was later told that two things saved him: his seatbelt and the fact that he was driving a Mercedes-Benz. And so it wasn't long before Mercedes turned that story into one of South Africa's most famous ads. BMW responded with its own version, showing the car safely navigating that same bend. And so just like that, safety became marketing, and it wasn't just engineering anymore, it was storytelling. And for years, brands largely controlled that story. But then the script flipped. You see, instead of brands telling you how safe their cars were, independent crash labs started proving it. And so that's where the NCAP, the New Car Assessment Program, steps in. They take cars, crash them into barriers, and measure how the cabin holds up, how the airbags deploy, and whether the safety systems actually step in. And then they publish the results for everyone to see. It honestly sounds like the coolest job in the world. It's the closest thing I could ever get to Top Gear. But behind that spectacle, it's serious science. And once that footage is out, brands can't change it. And so when it goes well, it goes really well. You see, a 5-star rating becomes marketing gold. That badge ends up on billboards, on websites, even stitched into showroom pictures. Models like the Mahindra XUV 300 built major credibility off strong global NCAP results, while vehicles like the Volkswagen T-Cross and the Volvo XC60 lean heavily on their NCAP scores in Europe. Because it's independent validation. It's the brand saying, don't just take our word for it, trust the independent report. But that same system cuts both ways. You see, when a car underperforms, that footage spreads fast, especially if it's a popular model. You see, the Chery Tiggo 7 Pro has just received a 2-star global NCAP rating. Now, the company has criticized elements of the test, but the official result remains on record. Now, it's a very visible SUV locally, which makes the optics louder. And so that's the gamble. You don't just inherit the upside on the public testing, you inherit the downsides too. So BBBEE has been a part of South Africa's economy for more than 20 years. It influences who wins government contracts, who gets big corporate deals, and who sits on company boards. Now, a new report is asking a simple but very uncomfortable question. Has it actually changed the lives of ordinary Black South Africans, or mainly just reshuffled ownership at the top? So this report comes from the Black Management Forum, an established organization representing Black professionals and business leaders. Now, in it, they argue that while BBBEE was designed to broaden ownership and participation in the economy, the way that it's been implemented has become overly compliance-driven. You see, many respondents say that the benefits have ended up concentrated among a relatively small group, and that the companies often focus on ticking scorecard boxes, sometimes at the expense of building stronger, more competitive businesses. And that's where the debate splits. You see, some critics say that the system hasn't delivered broad, meaningful change. Others argue that it's creating a new kind of exclusion where access depends on scorecards rather than merit, which goes on to affect business performance. Supporters, meanwhile, say that BBBEE remains essential to correcting deep historical inequality and that weakening it would stall transformation. For now, though, the bigger question is whether this system needs adjusting or defending as it stands. So Starlink is still not licensed to operate in South Africa, and it has now taken the battle out of the regulatory filings and into the public arena as it launched a myths and facts webpage aimed directly at South Africans. You see, the satellite internet provider says misinformation has clouded the debate and is urging supporters to pressure ICASA, the telecoms regulator, as the licensing process drags on. So at the heart of this dispute is South Africa's 30% BEE ownership requirement for telecoms licenses. Now, Starlink says it cannot dilute its global equity structure and instead has offered to comply through what's called an equity equivalent investment program, pledging R500 million to connect 5,000 rural schools with free high-speed internet if approved. Now, the communications minister has pushed for regulatory alignment on this, but Parliament pushed back, saying ICASA will follow its own process. So what would Starlink actually change for the country? Well, satellite access doesn't rely on fiber or mobile towers, which makes it particularly useful in rural and underconnected parts of South Africa, where millions still lack reliable broadband access. I mean, our neighbors like Lesotho have already granted operating licenses. South Africa, for now, remains in regulatory limbo. And before we cruise on to our bagel bite of the day, here's a couple other headlines worth knowing. For starters, government plans to launch a new state property company to professionally manage and develop public land and buildings. The aim is to cut reliance on private leases, reinvest rental income, and public housing. A new UCT Liberty Institute study shows black households now account for 41% of the high income bracket, up from 29% in 2012. Now, the middle and upper income population has quadrupled to 7 million, though poverty remains heavily concentrated. And Motors is expanding into newer Asian brands like Haval, Suzuki, and Mahindra as Chinese manufacturers rapidly reshape our local car markets. I mean, Chery is now South Africa's third biggest seller, overtaking VW in a major shift in buyer preferences. And on to our bagel bite of the day, but first, just a side note, if you are enjoying the show, please can I ask that you like and subscribe so you don't miss the stories that matter. And now, with that out the way, let's see what you got. The question is, which country ties Russia for having the most bordering nations? Is it A, China, B, Brazil, or C, the Democratic Republic of Congo? Bonus points if you know how many nations they border. We talk about South Africa like it's a small country, and in some metrics, sure, but by land area, we're roughly the same size as France, Poland, or Germany combined. 3 of Europe's biggest players condensed into one country at the bottom of Africa. Now, here's where it gets interesting. You see, Germany alone has over 80 million people. We've got roughly 64 million. And so as a result, Germany's population is tightly packed, and ours is far more dispersed. So we have metros, yes, but also massive rural stretches in between. But then look at Australia, which is more than 6 times South Africa's size. But how's this? Almost 90% of Australians live within 50 kilometers of the coast. And so as a result, almost all of its services, infrastructure, and government planning are built around this coastal concentration. Beyond that narrow band sits the outback where dreams go to die. It's enormous and sparsely inhabited, with fewer than 1 person per kilometer in some regions. Now, South Africa doesn't have that luxury. We don't have one dominant coastal strip carrying the country. We've got Gauteng inland, Cape Town in the south, Durban on the east coast, mining towns in the north, not to mention seaside villages and rural farming communities scattered everywhere in between. It certainly is something special. And as for that bagel bite, the answer is China. It shares land borders with 14 countries, the same as Russia, making them jointly the most border-connected nations on Earth. Brazil borders 10 countries, and the DRC borders 9. And my friends, that's it for today's show, and that is it for the work week. Thanks so much for watching. Hope you guys have yourselves a cracker Friday, a fantastic weekend, go Proteas, and we'll catch you all on Sunday for the next round of the good stuff. God bless.